Right, good morning, everybody. I hope you're all very well. Welcome to 2021. Great to have so many of you guys on the first webinar of the year. I know we had over 75 sign up, and I think the vast majority of those are going to join us. As always, this year brings a new few surprises, and we thought we would focus this week and just get our crystal balls out and share with you guys what we've picked up on, some of the things that we've heard, some of the things that we think are going to happen around sustainable design. By way of a bit of admin, please do keep your mics on mute, just so it cuts down any background noise. Do feel free to put your videos on. As I always say, it's always good to see some faces on the other side of the internet, maybe even the world, who knows. We've got a chat box which you can put any questions in, and I would say particularly for this session, do throw your questions out there. More than happy to comment on things that you may have heard about and you want to know a bit more about trends or things of interest, and we will have a section at the end of the webinar just getting your thoughts. I mean, it's one thing us telling you what we think is going to happen, but invariably, you know, people who join these webinars come from all different types of specialisms and backgrounds and have your own focuses, and always interested to see what you guys want to share for what you see coming this year. We can't cover it all off. So it'd be interesting to share with that in the chat box, and we can have a wider discussion at the end of the webinar. And also, as a reminder, this is being recorded. We're going to stick this up on our YouTube channel. If you want to keep up to date on these recordings and generally what we're doing with these webinars, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's gaining more and more followers, and some really exciting stuff to come in the next couple of months on this and wider education, but I'll touch on that later. So let's get going. Let's have a discussion and a chat about what we think is coming this year. And as I say, it's not too heavy. We've tried to cover off a lot of the key areas, and this is stuff that we've picked up on and actually seen. You know, we deal with hundreds of architects as a practice, and so some of these are real trends which we've seen through last year, and we're as sure as we can be that they're going to continue into this year as well. So if you haven't been part of our webinars before, just a quick kind of 30-40 seconds on who Mesh Energy is and what we're about. We are independent energy consultants. We've got a growing band of guys and girls who cover the country, Europe, and across the increasingly across the globe, helping people and design teams to deliver more sustainable buildings. And we can really get involved in anything conceivable as far as analysis, feasibility studies, full mechanical and electrical specification design on increasingly larger projects. But we cover off domestic, commercial, community, schools, education, and really everything in between. But our main bag is we're independent. We work on behalf of the client. We're not sponsored by any manufacturers. We simply want success, and we bring to bear many decades of experience onto your project if we get involved. So that's a really quick whistle-stop tour what we're about, and of course do visit the website mesh-energy.com for a lot more information and resources. So what we'll cover today, I've broken this talk down into 5 key sections as far as I can tell that kind of make some kind of sense. The first, we're going to be talking about energy efficiency standards and regulations, some of the changes that we're seeing coming up there. We'll look at low carbon and kind of wider intelligent building design, touch on a few topics there. We'll look at the green incentive schemes that we see, you know, what we see happening with those. We're going to look at learning and improving design again more generally, and a final look at actually team changes and some of the changes we see happening in team dynamics, but also client appetite for sustainability, both commercial and domestic. So quite a wide-ranging thing, but this is all around sustainable design. So let's kick off and see where this gets us. So kind of starting off really on the energy efficiency standards. There was a lot of talk last year about the Future Home Standard. There was consultation that was reached out about. And this is very, very, very closely related to SAP 10 and updates to the building regulations, particularly Part L, which is about energy efficiency, and Part F, which is about ventilation improvements in buildings or reduction in air permeability. And I started doing these on different slides, but actually they're so closely related, I thought I'd just do them on a single slide. And this is really primarily about domestic buildings just getting more energy efficient and the tightening regulations around those. And there was mention just in the last month or so with regards to the Future Home Standard, when they talk about gas boilers no longer being able to be put into domestic properties, that all relates to this Future Home Standard and these changing regulations. So the consultation finished for this kind of really, well, it was actually probably Q3 of last year, that towards the end of last year. There's a lot of faffing about, and certainly as the coronavirus thing happened, there was a lot of distraction and it went a bit quiet. But ultimately, the Future Home Standard and the changes to SAP 10 are all around the decarbonised grid. And particularly with the Future Home Standard, this is about, when it went out for consultation, was a couple of choices between just looking at energy reduction or carbon reduction through fabric improvements, or carbon reduction through fabric improvements and use of renewables, most notably solar PV. Now, they haven't made their mind up. This was just part of the consultation and they were getting people's thoughts on it. And there was talk of the Future Home Standard being introduced in 2025, which seems like a way off, but that's what they were talking about. Then there was a flurry of activity at the end of last year, talking about 2023, and then they very, very quickly retracted that, and then it all went radio silent. So that left us a bit baffled. But, and this is important to understand, SAP 10 particularly, which is an update to the SAP standards, or the SAP calculation methodology for target emissions rates and dwellings emissions rates, has been rumbling on for at least the last couple of years. And they've said they're going to release it. They said they're going to release it. They said they're going to release it. Nothing's happened. I think given the current climate in the UK, and even though sustainability is top of the agenda, I cannot see that this year there is going to be any change to that. There is the slimmest possibility that in the autumn, something will happen. There will be some announcement about the Future Home Standard, and particularly SAP 10 may be released. The point is, they are not going to release the changes to the SAP calculation unless they've got some really clear idea of what they're going to announce for the Future Home Standard. So they're very, very closely related. So we don't think anything that in the front half of the year, towards the back end of the year, maybe the slimmest of chances we'll get an update to SAP. Very, very likely, though, that it will be next year. Even, we're on the 6th of January. We think it's going to be next year when all of this gets clarified and some meaningful change gets made to regulation. RIBA 2030 is the next one. I've kind of classified this as a standard. It's more of a framework, really. Now, RIBA 2030 is an interesting one. Hopefully, a lot of the people on this are familiar with this, but this is essentially a framework which was put together by the Royal Institute of British Architects. We've done numerous webinars on it. It talks about improving operational energy efficiency, embodied carbon, health and well-being, overheating, potable water usage. And there's a roadmap to the end of the decade, which gets us some pretty big reductions there. Now, through last year, this was reasonably closely related to Architects Declare. A lot of Architects Declare architects signed up to RIBA 2030 and started getting on board with it. It was really well received, I think, in hindsight. And I strongly think that more and more people will get on board with it. It's simple enough to understand. People are getting their heads around how they deliver against it. And it makes sense to a lot of people. There is work to be done this year on improving the description of commercial building types. At the moment, there's domestic buildings, which RIBA 2030 goes up against, and commercial buildings. But commercial is such a big playing field. There was a lot of discussion about well, schools differ from high-rise flats, which differ from manufacturing facilities, which differ from another type of commercial building. And so they've picked up on that. And I think particularly, as we'll come on to, the conversation about embodied carbon, which is a big trend this year, SIBSI, and particularly the Greater London Authority, the GLA, and Reba have knocked their heads together, and they realise that they can't make further progress and get more people meaningfully on board with this unless they agree across the board as to what the targets are going to be. So the point here is that SIBSI, Greater London Authority, and Reba all have different embodied carbon targets, all have different thresholds, all have different building types, and they need to agree, and they are in the process of agreeing. And I've got here this quarter, or the beginning of next quarter this year, it's highly likely that there is going to be some kind of announcement or agreement between all of them that these are the targets which we agree across the board that need to be met and you need to be designing buildings against. And I think once we have that, there'll be a lot more confidence that buildings, right, okay, you know, we've got a stable platform here. We can design buildings, we can go for it. It's not going to be pulled out from under our feet. So that is happening as we speak right now, and over the next 3 to 6 months, that will get announced. It won't be a radical change from where we are, but I think it will be increasingly clear. So our prediction here is there will be unified RIBA 2030 targets and other SIBSI targets and GLA targets, and hopefully they will all be the same, hence the point about them being unified. But I strongly think, and this is one of the reasons why we help architects out with this, there is going to be increasingly more uptake on this framework. I can't see people all of a sudden changing tack and going away from it. I think if it's nurtured properly and we share more case studies of how to achieve against this framework, there'll be a lot of architects. And I know there are a lot of architects who are keen to design buildings, so those numbers will increase significantly. So low carbon intelligent building design. This is an interesting one. I'm going to start here with embodied carbon in the circular economy. Embodied carbon, by far and away last year, I think was the biggest, let's put it this way, kind of new kid on the block. There was a lot of talk about it. There were a lot of articles written about it. There was a lot of learning that was done about it. Not so much with the circular economy, but that is picking up steam. So one of the things to note here is that last year, and I think the consultation ends mid-January, is the Greater London Authority, who really seem to be pioneering a lot of this thing, a lot of this energy improvement regulation and movement. They have a whole life carbon assessment, which is strongly related and everything to do with embodied carbon. They have a consultation finishing in the middle of January. And essentially what this consultation is saying or asking or / telling people who are giving their replies to it is, for every application within the Greater London area, we will expect you to do an embodied carbon study of your development in order to go in for planning. Now that consultation ends middle of January. They're expecting by the summer to have, you know, what the result of that consultation is and what their move is going to be about it. This is, in many ways, this is kind of pretty exciting, because often a lot of the stuff that the Greater London Authority leads with, a lot of other councils start to follow. Embodied carbon more widely, there's still a lot more understanding to be had, and particularly through construction types and what reducing embodied carbon actually practically means in building design will continue through the year. And there's a lot of people keen to understand it, and again, keen to learn from projects that have gone ahead or learn from analysis that has been done, how you get that blend between not radically changing what you're doing, but changing enough and getting out of your comfort zone to meet these ever increasingly difficult targets. There will be more and more embodied carbon tools developed. If you've been on the webinars before, you'll have heard about our carbon calculator. Field and Clegg Bradley are doing a lot with their calculator as well. There are other calculators, and you've got HBERT and various things, which will no doubt, all of our calculators will be updated. No doubt there will be others. There's a lot of enthusiasm to better understand and better quantify embodied carbon. And as I said before, I think with unified targets, a lot of those calculators will start telling you the same thing, although they may be presented differently. There'll be a lot more cohesion between those tools and allow you guys at early design stages to get further and get more clarity on embodied carbon. Product manufacturers, particularly with regards to recycling and downcycling and things like this, you know, product manufacturers keep smashing away, focusing on recyclability, but more generally, building reuse and repurposing will become a greater focus. So rather than raising buildings to the ground that exist and building afresh, which has massive embodied carbon implications and makes the struggle even harder, there will be a lot of focus on, can you reuse and repurpose a lot of existing structures if you're in that kind of realm, and a lot of encouragement to do that as well. And so we'll see, you know, see a lot of that happening. So I think our other than better understanding of embodied carbon, our big prediction for this year is that by the end of 2021, if you do any work within the Greater London Authority area, you will be mandated to do an embodied carbon study of the development in order to even you know, tick the relevant boxes to go in for planning. So that's what we're putting our money on as far as a prediction there. Building analysis tools. This is an interesting one. I guess we've got a slightly different take on it than most practices, because we deal with analysis. But to do proper, robust building performance analysis, whether it's overheating, whether it's embodied carbon, whether it's carbon reduction, whether it's you know, potable water, all these kinds of things, there are more calculations that you need to do. And we particularly found that there were architects and design teams who understood that there was more analysis that needed to be done of buildings at an earlier stage in the projects. And so we saw that trend building last year, and that will continue into this year with a significant amount of further, and particularly around thermal modeling. So overheating and ventilation analysis, those will become increasingly important, particularly for commercial clients, but also for domestic clients. And as I mentioned, embodied carbon is being talked about more and more and more. And you may, by hook or by crook, be forced to do embodied carbon analysis. But if nothing else, I think there will be increased professional pressure to, at the very least, do a light touch embodied carbon analysis on a development to make sure you focus your mind on the design and make sure that the carbon is being reduced even at some fundamental levels for your designs. Coming back to embodied carbon, it is, I had a conversation with an architect the other day, and we were saying it is still very much a bit of a wild west with embodied carbon. As I say, everybody's kind of doing their own thing with embodied carbon calculators. And I'm talking about early stage calculators. I'm not talking about one-click LCA professional verifiable tools, but the early stages here, where there's a lot more uncertainty. There are a lot of people taking it in different directions. That's why I say we need certainty in the actual targets and the playing field to make sure that you know, everybody's using the tools in the right way for the right reasons and getting the same consistent answers across all of them. So our prediction for building analysis tools, or the analysis that you should be doing on buildings, is around building physics modeling. I think, you know, building physics modeling can still be done at a fair price. So for overheating, ventilation, and daylighting, thrashing the numbers out rather than guessing will be the order of the day this year. And particularly in RIBA stages 2 and 3, maybe even earlier RIBA stages than that, getting that strategy together and getting that analysis done. There will be a shift on the way that projects are designed. Certainly successful projects are designed going forward through this year. So I think there'll be a big focus on that in 2021. Net zero carbon design. This one, I think for many people, this is quite fluffy, and still for me, this is quite fluffy. I think the end point is kind of clear. Hopefully more and more of us know what net zero carbon means, which is essentially in the materials that go into the building, the operational costs of a building, the replacement of materials and stuff, net, it's not using carbon. You're giving back more than the building is consuming as far as carbon is concerned. And so whilst we understand the singularity, a lot of the documents that you see around this is pretty fluffy. I've seen a lot of hierarchies about the steps that you take, and of course every single building is different. But a lot of people interpret this in different ways. But I think it is worth a mention because it's getting a lot of press. There's a lot of articles being written about net zero carbon design. There's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, and it is a hot topic. And so there will be, I mean, certainly around this topic, fundamentally, there are 4 key areas. If you're not familiar with net zero carbon design, it's really split into kind of four key areas. So how do you avoid carbon through low energy design, particularly around embodied carbon, looking at renewable technologies, looking at local procurement? There's very, very similar stuff here between embodied carbon calculation and RIBA frameworks and all this other kind of stuff. And then ultimately there's offsetting emissions at the far end if you can't design those elements into the building. But what's most interesting here, particularly for commercial clients, is this is very, very, very sensitive. And you will have noticed the various TV adverts and big brands declaring their net zero carbon targets. Some companies are trying to get to net zero carbon by 2030, some by 2040, some by 2050, and some very, very, very big Goliaths of our commercial world are getting there. And you know, when they're focusing on it, there's something pretty serious happening. I think some of the other things that we've talked about, the regulation, the RIBA 2030 framework, are more kind of tangible things to kind of get your head around. But you will find, as I say, if you're particularly dealing with commercial clients, as we are finding, we are being asked to do net zero carbon energy strategies for the rest of the decade and beyond for commercial clients. Domestically, you know, you've got passive house and those kinds of things. So domestic clients will be talking less about net zero carbon design, but this is very much probably more of interest for commercial clients, this particular area. And I guess really our prediction here is that it will be better understood. It will definitely be talked about in more detail in 2021. There will be a hell of a lot more businesses and developers committing to targets. The great thing is, even though this may seem kind of fluffy in how you kind of get there and what people are saying, and I think a lot of people are making commitments without truly understanding what it means, is that it becomes a lot more exciting because if people are talking about these targets, particularly for big business or for developers, for example, I mean, Taylor Wimpey or Barrett's or, you know, Bellway or whatever. I mean, those are some pretty big names there, but these are guys that are driven by profit and often driven by money. But the reason they're talking about this is because there's a lot of commercial value now seen in net zero carbon, and investors particularly, and I'll come on to this with regards to client appetite, investors in projects are now looking for some of this stuff to be baked into the design, and they will put their money where sustainable design is being focused. So green incentive schemes, the Green Homes Grant, you may have heard about this. This is a domestic grant which covers off payments if you've got an existing building and you're looking to improve you know, the windows or the heating system or the doors or the roof insulation or the cavity wall insulation. In another guise, this was the, what was the scheme before? The Green Deal scheme. And at the moment, this particular grant scheme has been extended to March 2021 after a pretty tumultuous start at the end of last year. Still, this scheme is really, really, really struggling. again, it hasn't been rolled out particularly well at all. There was a fair chunk of money put behind it, but the actual administration of the scheme has been pretty diabolical, and people are taking, a lot of manufacturers and installers are taking advantage of the scheme by essentially hiking their prices up and trying to grab the free government money, sadly. It may be extended, who knows? The way that these schemes usually go are they muddle through for a bit, then they stop, take a breath, they figure out whether it's worth continuing with or continue, or figure out if they're going to can it. Sadly, I don't think this particular scheme in its current guise will be successful. And so unfortunately, it's a bit of a dire prediction for this year. I think the Green Homes Grant Scheme will, I've used the adjective limp there, and I think that's what it will do. I think it will limp through 2021. I think, as I say, at some point it will be reviewed, and I'm not sure it's going to help as many people as it sets out to do. I think they've got to change the way in which the scheme is administered in order for it to be successful. So unfortunately, that's a bit of a sad prediction for the Green Homes Grant, but that's what I feel based on the information that we've got and the stories that we've been hearing. The renewable heat incentive, both domestically and commercially here, is actually one of the real success stories for green incentive schemes. It's been the renewable heat incentive domestically and commercially has been going since about 2013, 2014. Has been really, really successful. It's paid out over a 7 or a 20-year term, depending on whether you're doing domestically or commercially. And so you get paid if you're putting in air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, solar, hot water technology, or biomass technology. Now, what's interesting is that the domestic scheme expires in a few months' time. The commercial scheme expires in a year's time. They have held back a bit. They did do an extension to the commercial scheme recently. It's a bit strange what they're doing here, because I think these schemes are going to be around for a long time to come. I can see the schemes continuing till the middle of the decade at the very least. But they seem to be a bit slow and kind of last minute will extend it another year. So this scares a lot of clients. If you tell a client, look, you know, we're pretty sure you're going to get the domestic subsidy, but it runs out in March, you know, that's quite tricky for them. So it is difficult, but hand on heart, I think these will be extended, and they will be extended for a while to come. But at the moment, these schemes, as I say, expire this year and next year, respectively. So our prediction on that one is, I think the schemes will be extended, and the commercial scheme as well will be extended. I'm not aware at the moment of anything in the pipeline which means that there will be any other subsidy schemes. So I think they may tweak this a bit, but I think they will continue going with the renewable heat incentive scheme. It seems to be working, and they've got something that works here. So I think they'll continue with it until the market's big enough that it's not needed. So this next section I've kind of called learning and improving design. I've got collaboration starting here. And again, we saw a big trend last year on collaboration between design teams and external consultants on a new level that we hadn't seen before. I think there were a lot of architects and design teams who were reaching out and being pretty honest about the fact that, you know, they didn't know it all. They needed help with sustainability. They were keen to learn, and they were keen to collaborate at very early stages, which was pretty refreshing. We hadn't really seen that over the last couple of years. And that will continue this year. I think the pressures and the way that the market's going will continue. And I really welcome personally, and as a business, we welcome collaboration, because you can get so much more done just by being honest about where the project's at and getting help at an early stage. It is still tricky though, finding decent, I've called them kind of educated collaborators here, It's sometimes easy to reach out to product installers and manufacturers because, funny enough, they know their products. And again, if you've been on webinars before, you'll know that there are potential issues with doing that. You really need somebody on your side who you can work with, collaborate with, use their experience, and use the wider team experience to thrash through the issues and get that analysis done before you start going down a particular manufacturer or product path. I think, and this is where we've made a big effort here to try and share case studies. So where success has been achieved, sharing those and finding out what's been successful. And as I say, we see great things for collaboration this year. I think there will be a lot more increased opportunities for collaboration and a lot more openness. I think that's been a big change, and certainly solving those what can be quite tricky sustainable design challenges, even from first principles, is going to be really, really key. So do bear that in mind and be open to that if you're not already, knowing that the other practices that are in your realm are softening and doing that with great success. The other real one that we're really excited about is post-occupancy evaluation. Now, this for a long time has been a key kind of RIBA stage 7, the kind of the in-use bit, but it's been kind of glossed over a lot. Now, there was more and more talk about post-occupancy evaluation last year, and not least, there was the recent announcement that the Sterling Prize now will require post-occupancy evaluation, even be it a light touch. It will be a prerequisite for entering that award, and that's quite an interesting move. And probably some would argue, not before time. But essentially, this is about finding out how your building's performing. It's one thing analysing the building, but taking more time at the end of the project to go back, find out how it's performing, find out if the building is being used in the way that it was described during design. Looking at electricity bills, this can be very, very light touch, or it can be super duper invasive, both domestically and commercially we're talking about here, but particularly domestically. So certainly domestically, we will see that I think the biggest changes for post-occupancy evaluation. And I think this all comes around by better understanding what this means and how much it costs. There's a big hang up about doing post-occupancy evaluation at the moment because budgets get spent. People think it's very, very expensive to do without truly understanding what post-occupancy evaluation means. So a better understanding of the subject through this year and how to better integrate it into project planning and delivery. As with all these things, if you understand what's meant at the beginning of the project, often it doesn't take a lot to integrate it, plan for it, and deliver it at the end. And I'm going to put my hat in the ring here and say that our prediction will be that post-occupancy evaluation by the end of 2021 will be mandatory for all RIBA awards. So I don't think you're going to be able to enter any RIBA award by the end of the year without showing how the building is actually performing. I think the Sterling Prize will open a floodgate there, and the rest will quickly follow. So more widely, education and knowledge sharing. This touches quite strongly on the collaboration piece, but I thought it needed its own kind of section. For me, education about sustainable design is, and change, once you realise, what needs doing, is the biggest single issue / opportunity for 2021. We've run these webinars since April of last year. They've done really, really well and continue to get better and better and better. And more widely, a lot of other people have been doing webinars and better education. And now that sustainable design is part of the RIBA core curriculum, there are some big moves that are being made by RIBA in order to kind of double down on that education piece. And in order to solve these design challenges, learning or knowing what we don't know is the biggest thing, and sharing with others as rapidly as we can do using the network effect, sharing with others rather than relying on kind of linear learning is absolutely key to making the rapid progress that we need to this decade. So with that in mind, and having talked to Reba in detail and doing stuff ourselves and on our own plans for this year, Reba have recently launched the Reba Academy, which is, and I know for sure that Reba are doing a big online CPD push, trying to improve their CPD offerings online. It's pretty diabolical at the moment, the CPD offerings on the standard Reba website. And therein lies an opportunity. So I know there's a lot of work in the background trying to improve on that. And as I say, sustainable design is part of the Reba core curriculum, so they will continue with that. But also, and this is a kind of a bit of insider knowledge really, our prediction is that there will be more opportunities and more platforms set up so that education on this kind of content and sustainable design is accessible. And the reason that I say we've got insider knowledge about that is because that is exactly what Mesh Energy is just about to do over the next couple of quarters. So we will be launching a platform to double or triple down on the work that we've been doing here, to allow you to talk to other like-minded individuals, talk to others in that sustainable arena, to access CPDs, to do courses, to do all kinds of stuff. And that is being planned as we speak. And we believe that has the biggest opportunity for getting us further, faster, and that will be happening this year for sure. So kind of the final section I've got here is on teams and clients. And this is really, again, some of the dynamics that I've seen happening in other practices last year, particularly around design teams, architect design teams who are interested in sustainability. And I think what really kicked this off was the pandemic. But I think there are a lot of teams reassessing their purpose and why they've got into architecture. And particularly depending on the mix of your team or the people in your company, particularly if you've got younger members of staff, purpose and sustainability will mean a hell of a lot to those individuals. And it's great to see a lot of practices have been doing this, and they really, a lot of practices want to make a change in sustainability, and sustainable design is a big part of that. There's a great opportunity at the moment to learn. A lot of people are at crossroads. They've got to figure out, maybe work's dropped off, maybe it's an opportunity to take a different direction now and really embrace sustainable design. But there's a great opportunity to learn and improve and do better. And I think, given the fact you guys are on a webinar right now, you know, you guys have that learning mentality, and I think that's quite infectious, particularly because there's loads of cool stuff to learn at the moment, which you can immediately put into practice on your projects. And one of the other beneficial bits here, particularly if you own a business, is that staff recruitment, I think staff recruitment is strengthened by sustainable goals. So if your team or your business has kind of sustainable goals and you're advertising those and you're actually doing work with those, it's far easier to attract motivated staff to your business. So our kind of more general prediction here is that design teams will be further strengthened and recruitment invigorated by low carbon design and sustainability goals. So if you look in the wider context here, behind just doing a bit more analysis on your projects and getting the client's head around sustainability, sustainable design and sustainability actually strengthens a lot of teams, because it cuts right to the heart of what a lot of people's purpose is over the next decade and beyond. And this is affecting people's families, environment, you know, global matters, not just work. We're looking a a lot wider than that now. So that's our kind of general trend and something to be aware of for the team this coming year. And then finally on client appetite. So what this kind of alludes to is kind of what's happening with the market really and what clients are asking for. There are a lot more sustainably educated clients. There are a lot more clients coming on to us who have done their own research, who want sustainability to be part of their design, both commercial and domestic. Almost all domestic clients now are interested in middle of the road gas boiler alternatives. If they're off grid, they want to know what the sustainable solution is. And almost all clients who are even on the gas network want to know what it costs and what the options are for a more sustainable build. I mean, probably 9 out of 10 clients are like that. And that will be a big trend. By the end of 2021, it will only be the laggards which are asking for non-sustainable solutions. Commercial clients, as I say, depending on who the investors are, depending on the commercial scheme, you've got BREEAM and various other quite stringent sustainable targets now that are being met for commercial buildings. As I say, if you're building anything within the Greater London Authority, it's likely that your clients will be expecting and needing a holistic and sustainable building design just as a starter for 10. It may be light touch, it may be very heavy touch. We've dealt with commercial clients last year who, really they weren't interested in anything else other than BREEAM outstanding. They weren't willing to entertain anything else because they realized what the marketing potential was for a very sustainable and high grade building. I think we'll see more of that through the year. But as I mentioned quickly there, investors, there are a lot of investors getting turned on to the fact that if you put your money into a green or sustainable building project, funnily enough, banks are starting to lend differently and more positively for renewable and sustainable buildings. There's some serious chunks of money which are only going to sustainable projects. And as I alluded to, the big housing developers at a very high level, investment now is really the interest is only in sustainable buildings. If you're just building like you used to, then that investment is going to run out and dry up pretty quickly. So a lot of different pressures across the board and a lot of opportunities. So there will be a greater number of educated and driven clients that just want to make sustainability part of the brief beyond regulation. And I think in summary, as we started this, regulation is slow. I think it's a real travesty that the building regs, nothing's going to happen this year with building regs. As I say, it's the slimmest of chances. Future homestand 2025, even if they announce it in 2023 or make that the target for 2023, that is pretty slow. I mean, something needs to happen this year. And I think what's most encouraging here is that the market and the client-driven demand for this is overtaking what regs is asking for. And that is a really interesting dynamic that will continue to change this year. And so I think that building regulations can go stronger and not have to worry about projects delivering to that, because I think people are already getting there and the change is pretty rapid. So that kind of wraps up what I was going to say. That took slightly longer than I was hoping. I know we've got some good questions here. Always interested to know what you guys are thinking. So do put something in the chat box and we'll try and get them answered. So let's just go through some of the questions that we've got here. So Rob's asking about hydrogen boilers, and that's an interesting one actually. There were a lot more air source heat pumps and stuff specified for projects, but we got a lot more questions last year about hydrogen boilers as well, and that did hit the press. I think interestingly, hydrogen was talked about in two different realms last year: cars and buildings. and the building infrastructure. And I think there are two different answers. So let's talk about buildings. So buildings, there is complete sense in using the gas infrastructure to distribute another type of gas. You know, I think it would be pretty wasteful if the gas infrastructure just became worthless over the next decade. And there are moves to have hydrogen-ready boilers and start mixing hydrogen with gas through the network, and essentially over time increase the proportion of hydrogen running through that gas network over the decade and beyond. As far as I'm aware, there aren't mega changes that need to be done to existing boilers in order to burn hydrogen. The problem comes, though, in the manufacture and storage of hydrogen. It is a very, very energy intensive process to, particularly to store hydrogen. It's often stored in its liquefied form. And that is causing a big headache in the kind of the longer term strategy. But I would say probably nothing particularly to worry about over the next few years, but certainly the back end of the decade, hydrogen will become more meaningful. And I think something that looks like a gas boiler will become a hydrogen boiler, and the gas network will be used. Sarah asked, I think this was to do with the RHI, wasn't it, Sarah, about heat pump subsidies. So Sarah said there, are the RHI subsidies not being replaced by upfront subsidies for heat pumps? Well, this is where the kind of the Green Homes Grant thing both of these grants are working together. I don't think the renewable heat incentive, which is a subsidy at the moment, and the difference between subsidy and grant here is grant is you get the money up front. Subsidy in this context, it means you pay up front out of your own pocket and then you get paid over a given term. I don't think the government will, from a cash flow point of view, start fronting meaningful grants for heat pumps. There is obviously the Green Homes Grant scheme, which does give you money up front. As I say, that's faltering at the moment, but I don't see the renewable heat incentive scheme changing to a grant scheme. I think it will continue as a subsidy scheme. So the client pays up front, which may be offset in part by this Green Homes Grant scheme. As I say, you can do these things in combination. But I don't see the RHI changing in any kind of meaningful way. Claire's mentioned there about the ARB and the RIBA have made sustainability a mandatory responsibility for its members. Yeah, and mandatory for all students studying architecture. Councils are also updating local plans to require BREEAM. Yeah. I mean that's only a good thing, and I think particularly for it's fascinating talking to the younger generation of architectural students coming through, and Claire, you will know better than anybody, given that you educate them. There's a huge amount of enthusiasm, and sustainability is really very, very high on the agenda for the next generation coming through. So it's easy that those guys and girls coming through don't need to be converted, but what they do want to see from the existing architects and the guys that do have experiences, they have a place to join, that even architect practices that have been doing it for years and years and years are driven by that. So they can find a home, they can learn that their purpose and their principles are all aligned. But it is great to see what the younger generation of architects is coming through with. It's there's a big opportunity there. And then there's Sarah mentioned about the clean heat grant being consulted on. That's an interesting one. I'm just having, I don't know at the moment. I don't know enough about that, Sarah. We'll see. At the moment, when does that consultation end? Yeah, I mean, they've talked about extensions to the RHI scheme there. As I say, I think there's a lot of things up in the air at the moment. But as we know more about it, we will try and let you guys know. I think overall with the grants and subsidies scheme, there has been, rightly or wrongly, there's been a lot of distraction with the coronavirus work that the government's having to be done. I went to EcoBuild in the first week of March last year, a week before lockdown happened. And they talked about a long list of things that were going to happen last year. SAP 10, building regs changes, RHI 2, all kinds of things, which never happened. And a lot of that stuff dried up. And I think, as I say, rightly or wrongly, that they're pushing this kind of stuff back. And I think this is why it's so important that we as a design community get our clients fired up, find out cost-effective and practical ways of including sustainable design rather than waiting for grants, subsidies, regulation and stuff to come through. Because I think a lot of clients are fired up for this. Of course, cost always makes a big difference on a project. But I think, as I've mentioned before, with proper design and intelligent design at the right phases of a project, these projects needn't get ridiculous with cost. There can be a small amount of uplift, but actually you can make a big impact just by better engineering the project from first principles. So the fact that these grants and subsidies and stuff are getting pushed back, I don't think we should wait. I think we should continue sharing, continue educating ourselves. I think we'll be surprised at how far we get. Any other questions there? I know Sarah, you came back on Claire's thing there about BREEAM. Not sure about BREEAM being a good thing across the board. That's an interesting point there. I've just been working on a project going through outstanding. Bring BREEAM. Yeah. I mean, again, that's a whole nother discussion about whether BREEAM is right or wrong. I think taken to extreme, BREEAM can be quite costly and a lot of red tape there. I think what we can do, though, and this is where I think the RIBA 2030 framework, albeit voluntary, can extract a lot of those key points out there and really focus the mind on embodied carbon, reducing operational energy usage, and some other key things. But that, as I say, that's another quite big discussion, and it might be an interesting one, Sarah and Claire, to be had between yourselves after. Have we got any other questions going? As I say, we're only slightly ahead of the curve compared to you guys. We as I say, we do talk to a lot of architects, and those trends that I've got there, I think, are a fair reflection. No doubt things will happen that we've got no foresight of whatsoever, and some of the things that we've predicted won't happen. But I think there is a lot to look forward to. I think if you are, as I say, keen to learn, keen to get your head around what net zero carbon means, some of these frameworks, focusing in on better, more sustainable design, I think your years are going to be a fantastic success. And as always, we're here to help you out wherever we can do. And as I say, one last kind of final plug, the platform that we're launching very shortly, what I would like to do with that, so this will be a combination of CPD, knowledge sharing, community, where like-minded individuals who care about sustainable design are getting together. What I would really like to do is all of you guys who consistently come to these webinars, given that you've got kind of learning and you realize how important learning is, I would like to give you guys the first opportunity to join that network. And you know, it's highly likely that we will offer that at a massively discounted rate in order to allow you guys in and allow you guys to see what that can bring. But we're really excited by that, and I think we can really leverage, as I say, knowledge sharing and education through that and get some decent CPDs on there, get some decent courses as well. So we will let you know more about that in the very near future. As far as next week's webinar is concerned, do sign up for this one. If you are at all interested in Goldsmith Street and the Sterling Prize and what happened in 2019 with that project winning the prize, we're going to be talking with Zach Munro, who was on the Sterling Prize committee from Zach Munro Architects. And we're talking with Anna-Lee Riches, who heads up McHale Riches. They were the architects behind Goldsmith Street. We're going to be talking about the project. So Anna-Lee is going to be presenting on that. I'm going to be the emceeing that one. And then we're going to be talking to Zach about why that particular project won, why the sustainable aspects of that project trumped some of the other big contenders. As you'll be aware, that the Sterling Prize now, as we mentioned, now needs post-occupancy evaluation in order to enter the Sterling Prize, and we'll be touching on that as well and getting those guys' thoughts on that, and as well as answering any questions that you guys might have. So a great opportunity to hear a great webinar there. We've got some great other guests lined up also for the coming months. So for now, folks, I think just having a quick look, that is it. And we will join you next week at 10 a.m. sharp. So thanks very much for your time, guys.